Good evening to the class of 2013, and congratulations. You are about to begin a journey that will, I believe, turn out to be four of the very best years of your life. When President Riggs, and I really like saying that, it sounds so special because she's such a special woman, he invited me to present the Gettysburg Address. She said to me, since you'll be traveling such a long distance from New York City, and since the Gettysburg Address only lasts for 2 minutes, she actually told me the same story that she told you, that prior to President Lincoln speaking for 2 minutes, that the prior speaker spoke for 2 hours. She said, given the length of your journey, Bruce, I'll give you the option of speaking either for 2 hours or for 2 minutes. You'll be pleased to know that I've opted for the latter, not the former. In all seriousness, when you think about this address, and I'd like to just give you a little perspective before I read it to you, there's some perspective worth considering. Lincoln in his address at one point said, "The world will little note nor long remember what we say here." Now, either he was remarkably humble, or the fact is that you don't always recognize history in its making. Because obviously the entire world, in fact, does remember and frequently celebrates what was said on that day 146 years ago. He also says at a later point in the address, be dedicated to the unfinished work they, referring to those buried here, nobly advanced. I would suggest to you that those who did sacrifice for freedom and equality had some sense of what they were doing. They had some recognition of the fact that the Emancipation Proclamation would at some point in time result from their lives being sacrificed on the battlefield. But I suspect that even in their wildest dreams, they could have never imagined the fact that in giving Black Americans freedom and equality in this country at that time, 146 years ago, that today, the 44th President of the United States, sitting in the Oval Office that Abraham Lincoln sat in, is now an African American. What they did then has turned out to be so much more than what it seemed to be at that time. So with that in mind, allow me, if I can, to challenge you. President Lincoln said, there is unfinished work yet to do. And I suggest to you that you accept the accountability and the responsibility to somehow, in your own way, find a way to get some of that unfinished work finished. I would say to you that you can do it your way. I will say to you that while you're at Gettysburg College, certainly you will study history. Certainly you will learn history. But I challenge you while you're at Gettysburg College to figure out how to make history. This is your journey. It's an individual journey. It is a collective journey. And as we recite the great history of Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, please be mindful today, tonight, and for the next 4 years that you have an opportunity to make history. You may not know that you're making it at the time, but depending upon your sacrifice and your commitment, someday it will be appreciated, valued, particularly by those who are buried here who look for folks just like you to continue their unfinished work. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth.